Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our conversation with Rajna Swaminathan, who we spoke to in January 2024. You talk about studying with your father and also Umayal Puram Sivaraman. Both of those must have been intense experiences in different ways. Can you talk about your musical training and your path to becoming a multi-tradition musician and composer?
I pretty much started learning mridangam and taking classical piano lessons at the same time and sort of vocal lessons for a short time, although I think I was more self-taught with the voice. And over time I didn't really classical piano lessons didn't really resonate with me because I was always just doing my own thing and wanted to improvise. And it's hard to grow up with like such an improvisational music and then not want to transfer that to an instrument like the piano.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite I wasn't the most obedient like classical piano student, but and my teacher figured that out. They were like, yeah, do you want to teach her jazz or something? Like, I feel like she's not really doing the classical thing. So it's funny to me, I guess, now that I've come back to classical music in a way, because it's something that really has only been the case for me over the past few years. I think it started maybe right before the pandemic, that I started, I had a fellowship with Gabriela Elena Frank through JLF CAM and started exploring writing for a string quartet and just getting back into this like heavily notated form of music. Um, and a similar thing, I think, with piano and voice, like for a long time, they were just to me like ways of composing, and that my primary instrument was the mridangam still. And again, over the last few years, um, I've just become more comfortable incorporating that into my performances as
Yeah.
well. I did begin with my father because he already played, and he's very passionate about the mridangam. And um, I mean, I don't remember what drew me to the instrument, or if it was more something that was orchestrated by my family, because my mom was like, okay, my mom was an only child, and felt like she could connect with her father, who was a singer, and then it sort of didn't allow her to connect as much with her mother. So because I have a younger sibling, my mom was just like, all right, I'm gonna engage with Anjana, and we'll work on the violin thing, and you, Rajna, you work with your dad and on this mridangam thing. And so that way we're paired off and we have ways of bonding as a family. I don't know what the exact story is, but I was clearly drawn to the instrument and enough to kind of keep going. It is
Mhm.
frustrating to learn with a parent at that age, because I do remember fighting a lot with my dad. It's just like my hands were small. I never had like these days I think people have mini instruments when they're that
Mm.
age. They have
Mhm.
like a baby mridangam that they can start learning on. But I was learning on the full size. So I was so frustrated because my hands were too small. But my dad was patient, I think, and we ended up having a rapport with it. And he actually ended up being quite important to my training later, as I was learning to kind of accompany performances. He would listen to music with me, and we would talk about various styles of accompaniment. And so he was a mentor for me like throughout, and still is, someone who I interface with a lot around how to even in how to feature the mridangam in these other contexts. I think he has a lot of thoughts about it, and he'll always be the one like, I can't hear the drum enough, like, you might get
Bring
different.
it out.
You need to do more solos, or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, he was sort of there throughout as a teacher, and we both studied with Umayal Puram, who came and stayed with us in Maryland. And my parents were organizing performances for him in the US, and so I grew up around him. He was sort of like a grandfather figure around. So he would come for a couple months every year or every other year. And um, I also went to India to study with him.
Wow.
And he's a taskmaster for sure. He's as a teacher, and has sort of very high expectations. Um, so I think it was mostly like the intensity of navigating these cultures, like being in the US and just trying to have like a, I guess, a normal American childhood, but having this kind of very cool thing that was going on, which I was studying with this teacher. And I think for some time when I was a kid, I didn't really fully grasp the enormity of it. I think I was just like, all right, well, this is this grandfather type person, and maybe that's better. I think
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like that's better. If you don't know the whole weight of things, you actually tend to absorb things a little better. Because I used to tell him, oh, I have homework. I don't have time for class. I was very like informal
Blase.
sometimes. But over time, I think I started going to India more to perform, and kind of understood the context that I had been sort of trained in, and this whole culture that exists there around this music. And so I think at least until I was about 18, I was quite serious about performing this instrument in that context. And so the intensities of that are just what they are, because there's just an expectation that you'll go to a certain depth with it.
Hmm.
And also just the fact that there weren't any other female mridangam players that I really knew of, not too many at least. I had one cousin of mine who's a female mridangam player, and then just a handful of others, really. So it was mostly a male-dominated field, still is. I think there are a few more women playing it now than there used to be. So it was just uh, an interesting experience to go to India and then have people perceive you in a particular way and not know exactly how to react or say things like, "Oh, well, you play well for a girl, I guess," or things like that, which is not very encouraging. But I think become coded as such a masculine art form that it's hard to know what to do with a woman playing it. Um, so yeah, I guess that was my upbringing with mridangam, and with singing. I think, I always loved singing as I was when I was a child, and I never totally took formal lessons in it. Although obviously I was absorbing a lot of music, both Carnatic and, like, we used to listen to a lot of different kinds of old Bollywood music at home. I really loved like and maybe this is answering one of your other questions, but um, I think that the way that I sing now integrates a lot of different kinds of vocal technique, that I just sort of absorbed and found my own way into. But I did take some formal lessons as an adult with T.M. Krishna, who's a Carnatic vocalist and activist. So that was a sort of uh, avenue that I went down for a little bit, to just take some formal lessons that way. Um, but yeah, I think hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, and then some. Gave me some more questions to think of, actually. Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Rajna Swaminathan, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button, and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times, and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts, and tune in next week for Good Measure.